Japan is warning about escalating national security threats in its annual defense white paper. Those threats include repercussions from Russia's war with Ukraine, Beijing's intimidation of Taiwan, and vulnerable technology supply chains.
This year's defense white paper explains the security challenges facing our country, including Russia's invasion of Ukraine and strategic competition, particularly between the United States and China. In addition, with regards to Taiwan, China has indicated that it will not hesitate in resorting to armed negotiations for its unification, and tensions in the region are rising.
Japan's defense minister added that the defense report also provides solid reassurance about the Japan-U.S. alliance, as well as plans for cooperation with other countries to create a more secure environment in the region. The report comes out as the Japanese government prepares its defense budget request for next month. That document will aim to generate public support for an unprecedented hike in military funding. Japan's ruling party is looking to double defense spending to 2% of its GDP over the coming years. That would total over $70 billion. Beijing accused the report of, quote, exaggerating the so-called China threat and interfering with the Taiwan issue, something Beijing labels as China's internal affairs. Other events also taking place across the country looking to bring awareness to the continued persecution of Falun Gong in China. Here are the details on a few of them and how lawmakers in Washington are showing their support.
Tortured, beaten, imprisoned, killed, and ostracized. These and other abuses are some of what Falun Gong practitioners routinely suffer in China. And the Chinese Communist Party has largely covered them up for the past 23 years. The U.S. State Department stated Thursday that the persecution is unacceptable and must end. Also on Thursday, to commemorate the anniversary of the start of the persecution and raise awareness about it, Falun Gong practitioners from around the United States gathered at the nation's capital. Ahead of the rally in Washington, Senator John Boozman commended them for their perseverance, saying, "Your struggle for religious freedom has been nothing short of an inspiration to those around the world who respect freedom of religion." Rashad Hussain, the U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, took to Twitter to voice support for the millions undergoing persecution in China. He wrote, "I stand in solidarity with the Falun Gong community. Thousands have been tortured, harassed, imprisoned, and forced to renounce their beliefs. This unjust campaign must end." Senator Ron Johnson similarly applauded those who practice Falun Gong for their continued persistence in the face of what he called the intensive, comprehensive, and unforgiving campaign the regime has waged on faith. Congressman Stephen Lynch wrote in a letter that the horrific reports of atrocities targeting Falun Gong practitioners in China are a reminder for the outside world to act, and that so long as the Chinese government engages in these egregious violations of basic human rights, we cannot and will not stand idly by. The continued campaign of torture has drawn growing condemnation toward the Chinese regime worldwide.
The Chinese regime is buying up farmland in North Dakota. The problem is the plots of land are really close to a U.S. Air Force base. Now, American officials are raising concerns. Could the Chinese Communist Party use the land to spy on the U.S. military? The Grand Forks Air Force Base is home to some of the country's most sensitive military technology. That includes drone technology used for space and satellite operations. The base is also home to a networking center. A local senator says it handles the backbone of all U.S. military communications across the globe. The land purchase is a $2.6 billion deal by Chinese company Fufeng Group. The city's mayor has pushed for the project, which he said is the largest single investment in the city's history. But some locals don't like the deal. One of the land sellers, Gary Bridgeford, told CNBC he had been called every name in the book by his neighbors for selling the property. Former telecom executive John Pelson told us it's not the amount of land China is buying that's the most concerning. It's where they are buying it.
But if you're building $700 million worth of corn milling and processing, which is what the Chinese company supposedly wants to do, there's going to be every opportunity there to make this an eavesdropping site. And there was no credibility, in my opinion, to the story about why they had to pick that location, which they acknowledged isn't near their customers, is far north for where they would have otherwise put it, and is the only location they're going to have in the United States, they decided that North Dakota was a place to be.
A representative for the Fufang Group's U.S. subsidiary denied the espionage accusations. China has a pattern of buying American land near sensitive military locations. In 2021, a former Chinese military official bought 130,000 acres of land close to Laughlin Air Base in Texas. The land bought by China surrounds that sensitive air base. Lawmakers and officials from both parties, including Elizabeth Warren and Mike Pence, have raised concerns about it. As part of the land purchases, China has been growing its presence in the American food system. In total, as of 2020, Chinese investors had bought almost 200,000 acres of farmland, worth a value of $1.9 billion. Britain's spy chief pointed to China as the agency's top focus. He said MI6 plays a role in helping British lawmakers navigate Beijing's black box of complex strategies. Here are the details.
China is now Britain's top intelligence priority. That's according to the country's spy chief.
We are putting more effort into China. We now devote more effort to China than any other single subject. So, for example, it has just moved past counterterrorism in terms of our mission. And that feels like a very big moment post 9/11, post 7/7 in London.
He points to the complexity of dealing with the threat posed by the Chinese regime.
This is still a pretty opaque system. I mean, at one level, understanding Xi Jinping's strategic intent is not difficult. If you read, Made in China 2025, he lays out for you their ambitions around technology and their desire to dominate key technologies. But if you go beneath that strategy in terms of how they implement, how they organize, how they, what their tactical intent is, and then what are the capabilities they're building up, that's a black box.
What's more, he touched on Beijing's influence activities in the UK.
And we've had a rather celebrated case in the UK recently of somebody working on behalf of the United Front Workers Department, whose job it is to try and influence our societies towards a pro-China position.
The United Front Work Department is a powerful agency under the Chinese Communist Party, tasked with overseeing foreign influence operations.
It's influencing other countries towards your position covertly, undeclared, using funding that's not on. So there's a lot of that going on.
Moore points out that Western democracies have one advantage that China doesn't: friends and allies that they can work together with to take on challenges.
Washington plans to pour over $1 billion into advanced satellites development. That funding will go towards systems to better track hypersonic missile threats. That's according to a comment from the Pentagon Monday. Defense officials announced 2 new contracts that will launch the tracking systems into orbit by 2025. Derek Turnier is the director of the Space Development Agency, part of the Defense Department. He said the contracts will provide 28 satellites, technology that will help counter threats from Russia and China. Both of those countries have been making strides in their development of hypersonic missiles. Turner told reporters on Monday that the satellites are specifically designed to face those threats, adding they will allow the U.S. to detect and track these hypersonic maneuvering vehicles and predict their impact point. Congress has provided additional funding for the program in response to concerns in the Indo-Pacific region amid China's rapid military buildup. According to Turnier, the program signifies a U.S. shift to a larger, overlapping system of satellites, meaning the country will have a greater number of cheaper satellites that can be replaced more often, with more up-to-date technology. He said the first batch of satellites would likely be followed by a larger second group of over 50 satellites. Earlier this year, the U.S., UK, and Australia announced plans to work together on hypersonic missile development. That's alongside China's escalating military aggression in the Pacific. Last October, a top U.S. military official confirmed that China had tested a hypersonic weapon, calling it a very concerning, very significant event. A Shanghai semiconductor company is reportedly shipping Bitcoin mining chips built with 7-nanometer technology. But concerns are rising over the device's possible military applications. Here's more.
A Shanghai-based microchip maker reportedly made a leap in developing its production technology. According to industry analysis from Tech Insights, Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corp., or SMIC, is shipping Bitcoin mining chips built with 7-nanometer technology. That's 2 generations ahead of its established 14-nanometer technology. Nanometers are used as a measure of a semiconductor's complexity. The smaller the number, the more advanced the chips that can be made.
The semiconductors are vital to every defense application, from drones to hypersonic missiles. They're driving the global digital economy, everything from artificial intelligence to wind turbines or electric vehicles or solar panels.
The recent development jump by SMIC has largely come as a surprise. The U.S. has curbed unlicensed sales of semiconductor making equipment to China since late 2020. The rule covers machines that can make chips 10 nanometers and smaller. So China's progress is casting doubt on whether Washington's control measures have proven effective. SMIC previously claimed it's been working on more advanced technologies since 2020, but the ability to make 7-nanometer chips despite those heavy sanctions has prompted concerns. In particular, over Beijing's drive to modernize its military.
Every single weapons platform that exists in the world today has a brain. And the brain is a semiconductor. And the more effective semiconductors that a nation has domestically available is going to find their way into defense applications. Absolutely.
As for how the Chinese firm gained the ability, Tech Insights suggests that SMIC's 7-nanometer chips may have copied the world's leading semiconductor giant, Taiwan's TSMC. Tech Insights reverse-engineered the SMIC chip as part of its analysis. It reported that initial images suggest it is a close copy of TSMC's 7-nanometer process technology. That's strong evidence to back TSMC, which has sued China's SMIC twice for allegedly copying its technology.
Several countries around the globe are pushing to ban traditional gas-powered cars and replace them with all-electric vehicles in the near future. But the proposal could lead to some problems, and one of them involves China's supply chain dominance. NTD's Colin Fredrickson has more.
Countries all around the world have come up with plans to get rid of internal combustion engine vehicles and replace them with zero-emission vehicles. Norway wants all vehicles to be zero emission by 2025, the most ambitious of all. Denmark, Iceland, Ireland, Israel, the Netherlands, and Sweden want 100% zero electric vehicles by 2030. China and Japan want all their cars to be fully electric by 2035. And France, Portugal, and Spain want all cars to be zero-emission vehicles by 2040. But electric vehicles still pollute the environment. Even though they themselves don't directly emit CO2, charging them requires electricity. Most electricity in the U.S. comes from fossil fuels. One study from the National Bureau of Economic Research found that EVs could actually be worse for the environment because of this. Another study found that charging vehicles at night could increase carbon emissions by 23 to 27%. And another problem is making the lithium-ion batteries that power electric vehicles.
Who makes all the supplies for the batteries? So that would be China.
Lauren Fix is an automotive expert at Car Coach Reports. Fix says China dominates the global production of lithium-ion batteries and their forerunner materials, and more.
It has to come down to components and parts and batteries. And if China's controlling the bulk of the supply issue as well as the microchips, they can supply and make the winners and the losers in this industry.
While China only has the 4th largest lithium reserves in the world, it's invested heavily to dominate every step, from getting it out of the mine to putting it into the car. Colin Fredrickson, NTD News.